Direct from rivals and Yahoo Sports. This is the BamaInsider.com podcast with your host, Kyle Anderson. Recruiting nuggets from Andrew Bone, the inside scoop from team writer Tony Tsoukalas, and information you crave on Alabama football. Welcome to the Bama Insider Podcast. Now, here he is, coming to you from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the managing editor of BamaInsider.com, Kyle Henderson.
LeBron James is a great player. There's been at least 20 barbershop type things I've seen on TV. I didn't know anybody owned that. I didn't even know he had one. I'm sorry that anybody could be offended by something that we were just having fun with, and I enjoyed it, and we're going to continue to do it.
I respect him as a coach, but I'll be damned if I allow someone to use our platform or try to do the same thing we're doing and just think it's okay. So the lawyers will figure it out.
LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James. LeBron James.
All right. What's going on? It's Kyle Henderson and Tony Tsoukalas on the BamaInsider.com podcast. Thanks for joining us. LeBron James and Nick Saban going at it to start the show. Tony, we'll just dive right into it. Is it just totally chaotic, or does LeBron James, really have something to go with right here?
The real winner in this is Alabama, because first of all, I don't think LeBron James has anything to go with on this. There's been a million of these barbershop things. The only thing I can say from LeBron James's spot is that the logos, if you look closely at the logos, they look kind of the same. But other than that, it's really, you can't really make a case in his direction. But like I was saying, the real winner is Alabama, because how much extra attention has this show got now? And how many people have watched what is it called, Talking Shop or Shop Talk? How many people have watched that show that wouldn't have watched it because LeBron James has an issue with it? It's reaching a way bigger audience than it would have reached, and it's just helping out Alabama even more. As long as this thing drags out, the more eyeballs will be on this little show, and Alabama wins.
I think the way Nick Saban handled it too was, it was classic boss move, just being like, all right, thanks for your attention. We're going to keep doing it. It was fun. And, we'll see what happens. I think, the barbershop, like Nick Saban said, it's been going around for a long time. There's several movies about it. Alabama certainly using it as a caveat to draw recruiting. And I love it. I wish I could get a haircut there. And I'm looking forward to the next show. But I wanted to welcome everybody. This is the BamaInsider.com podcast. It's been a minute since Tony and I have been on the mic together, but it's spring football. There's a lot to talk about. We'll keep it mostly football related. Wanted to open up the show, obviously, with some LeBron James and Nick Saban talk, and just kind of check in and talk some football. And this coming Friday, we'll have some news on Collin Sexton, whether he's heading to the NBA or not. Drum roll, please. Right? Will you be completely surprised if he stays? He's not staying.
I've heard the decision is closer than maybe some people are making it out to be, but I'd be surprised if he stays.
No.
It's a lot of money to turn down.
He's 100% going to the NBA. He's not coming back to play for Alabama basketball. I'm sorry. He's not. There's no reason to.
Here's the plot twist. What if he gets selected by the Cleveland Cavaliers?
There you go.
There you go. It plays with LeBron James.
I would actually like that.
It become full circle. There's actually been a few mock drafts that have Collin Sexton go in there. The catch to that is if he does get selected by the Cleveland Cavaliers, he will most likely not be playing with LeBron James next season, because I don't think LeBron James is going to be playing for the Cavaliers. But there is, I guess, a chance that they could both be playing together at the next level, which would be a very fitting way to end this whole mess.
What were your impressions yesterday from Nick Saban's press conference, other than the whole LeBron James? In my opinion, I thought the comments from Saban talking about the defensive tackle who will be part of the 2018 class, that he'll have a shot to instantly compete. What were kind of some of your general takeaways from Saban yesterday?
I think he's more impressed or more satisfied, I guess, with his offense than his defense. And one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that he kind of mentioned that he started the press conference by saying that, they needs to have more leaders on the defensive side of the ball. And then he mentions, a guy like Raekwon Davis, who I think a lot of people are expecting to jump into that leadership position, getting an off the field injury, and I think Saban said from goofing around. I mean, I think that kind of shows Saban's a little bit upset about players that, you know, should be stepping into a leadership position, maybe aren't yet in spring. And I think that's one thing that he's going to try to focus on, because you need to have some leaders on the defensive side step up, especially with how young that secondary is going to be.
It's been rather interesting to see the players that have already been injured already this season. I mean, Tua, right, with his thumb
or hand. It's actually more of a
finger,
index finger. Yeah.
Jerry Jeudy, Raekwon Davis,
Trayvon Diggs. Who was the other one that got hurt?
Matt Womack. Right?
Matt Womack. We're forgetting one from yesterday. But
I don't know. It'll come to us. But I mean, the injuries, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like we have a weekly injury report here at Alabama. And I mean, nothing very serious, but it's just like the injuries just have continued to carry over from last year. We're coming to you from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We got a ton of Alabama football spring coverage on BamaInsider.com. My name is Kyle Henderson. I'm alongside Tony Tsoukalas, who is our team writer. And Alabama will hold their first scrimmage this Saturday. The media doesn't get an opportunity to physically watch a scrimmage, but what are you looking forward to, I guess, hearing on how things are progressing, I guess, from the defensive secondary side?
Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how it holds up. You know, last year it was kind of, I think at one point Hootie Jones said that they got torched or they got lit up, or I forget how he worded it. But yeah, last year, you know, they had some problems, and obviously they figured it out by the end of the season. But there's going to be a lot of turnover, as much turnover as Alabama's ever had at that position. So it's going to be real interesting to see how people step up, especially if Trayvon Diggs is not available. I mean, the second unit in one of the dime, or I think it was the nickel package that we saw, they had a walk-on at a starting cornerback, or at a second-team cornerback slot. So there's not a lot of depth right there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out in a scrimmage when, you know, you have either Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa throwing at them. And that's another thing you could circle too, is how is the quarterback position going to play out? If both of those guys are going to be able to throw, who gets what snaps, how many reps does each of them get with the first team? There's a lot of interesting things to consider in this first scrimmage.
Yesterday at practice, this is on Tuesday the 3rd, during the end of practice, Alabama ran some goal line situational drills. What did you take away from that?
First of all, that it was pretty fun to watch. We don't usually get to see things like that. Alabama's linebackers struggled a little bit in coverage, but the thing I circled the most is how well Mac Jones looked. The guy was he looked very composed. He did not look like a redshirt freshman heading into his redshirt freshman year in the spring. He looked like someone that had been playing for a while. He made every decision he made was the right decision. The incomplete passes he had weren't forced passes. He threw it away. More often than not, though, he found the right guy. So I don't know if that drill is kind of more designed for the offense to. You never know on drills like that. It's really hard to kind of judge. It's hard to say that, you know, oh, the linebackers can't cover, or oh, Mac Jones is the best quarterback ever. But he certainly looked really good in that drill.
No, Mac Jones, I certainly agree. I mean, he's vastly improved year over year, and I think he's one guy that, you know, if things did fall in his hands, I think he would certainly deliver. I like what I continue to see from Mac Jones, and he's certainly improving, probably maybe under the guidance of Damian Harris, who looks to be one of his best friends on the team. Saban talked a little bit about Damian Harris yesterday. I mean, he's the leader of the offense, clearly, right?
He's Mac Jones' dad, too.
Yeah, that's like the weird thing that they have with each other. But Harris, I mean, he's polished, he's well-groomed, he's intelligent, he's articulate. I mean, Damian Harris, I mean, should have a monster year. I can't wait to see what he does come the opening game of the season, because I just, you know, I'm a big fan of just the way he carries himself. He's got a great mantra about him.
Well, yeah, you know, we were talking about leaders. I think he's going to be one of the biggest leaders on the offensive side of the ball, no doubt. Him coming back for that senior season is not only big in terms of, you know, what he can bring on the field, but just having that leadership, like you said, that poise, that veteran kind of moxie about him, I think it's going to go a long way for Alabama. he's a leader. He was a leader last season, and I think Alabama needs that. You know, I mean, Josh Jacobs is another guy that could step up into a leadership position, but other than that, you've got, you know, Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. They're younger guys. They're good. They're going to develop into those leadership roles later, but they're not there yet. So you need a guy like Damian Harris to kind of fill that role and be the kind of, I guess, the dad of the whole unit.
Is there a quarterback battle right now?
Oh yeah, there's a competition. I mean, that Saban said that every chance he's got. So these scrimmages are gonna be important. I don't necessarily think that it's gonna be decided this spring, but I don't know. The way I'm kind of viewing it is I don't think any of these quarterbacks could win the job this spring, but one of them could lose it. You know, if you had a really poor spring, you could lose it. But I think if they both do what they're supposed to, I think we're gonna probably still be having this discussion in the fall.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you know, clearly these two guys are capable of getting the job done. Now, what makes it so interesting is the fact that Tua came in and won the national championship. Now, what I read on the internet and on our message boards are people are like mad at Jalen. And I get it. He might not be the most polished quarterback, but in terms of what you have as a leader, as a part of the team, I mean, he's a tremendous asset. And I think, you know, him at the quarterback position, I mean, if he is able to beat out Tua, which I personally don't think he will. There you said it. I just think that, you know, he's going to have a place on the team, and I love what he does in the community. I love the way he carries himself as well. And I don't know. I think he's athletic enough to possibly play another position. I don't know what position he would potentially play, but, you know, I mean, Jalen's an important part of this team, regardless of what happens at the quarterback competition. What about leadership on the defensive side, Tony? We talked about the offense. Who's emerging as that alpha dog, as Nick Saban likes to call it?
Yeah, that's the thing. They're still looking for it. I think, you know, just by his production, you would circle Raekwon, but I'm not sure he's there yet in terms of being a leader. If I had to pick one, I'd say Christian Miller could really step into that role. He's a guy that...
Well, I like that.
Yeah, he's a guy that's, you know, overcome some stuff, and he's been in the program for a while. He seems to get it. He seems to have that drive. Terrell Lewis could step in there. You look at guys that theoretically could step in there, but they might not be ready yet. Mac Wilson.
What about Anthony Jennings?
Anthony Jennings, I forget, is another one I forgot about. Yeah, they're all people that can step in. You know, I think you would like to see players like Mac Wilson and Raekwon Davis kind of get that team concept, that, like, you know, bigger than just me and my production. And if they're able to do that, I think that they could be big cogs in leadership as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we skipped over the secondary. Deontay Thompson is a big one, I think, as well, just because of how young that unit's going to be. He's another guy I think that can really step into that leadership position, and he said that he's not really taking that for granted either. He thinks that has to be earned, and that to me shows that he's kind of ready to step into that mold. Just he knows that he's not just going to be able to step in and people listen to him as a leader. So I think that's going to be key for that secondary. I think he could also be a player that you circle.
Saban talked about the potential players who could fill a hole at nose guard. Can you elaborate on your article that you have on Bama Insider?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that jumped out to me that he named was Quinnen Williams. It's been a guy that's coming in off the edge, and we've seen him move inside at times, but you know, I think there's a lot of people that would like to see him transition into that nose guard role, just because of how good he's looked at the defensive end. And I think if you were going to put out, you know, your three best guys talent-wise, it would probably be Raekwon, Isaiah Buggs, and Quinnen Williams. Whether or not he's going to take a full-time nose tackle position, he seems a little bit on the lighter side to do so. I think he'd probably have to put on, at least 10 pounds, but probably more, maybe like 15. That's a lot to ask. Right now, he kind of looks like a guy that can play in the middle on spot duty, you know, kind of in certain different packages. But I think Alabama's going to need one of the other defensive tackles, whether it's Johnny Dwight or whether it's Saban mentioned both Fedarian Mathis and Stephon Wynn Jr. and also the new JUCO player. Is it Tavita Musica?
I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, he's a big guy. I think is it like 340 or somewhere around that?
He's a big boy, yeah.
Yeah, he's somebody that can eat up space in the middle, and there was a couple teams going after him, so he might be able to be a player that can come in right away and help out.
Let's talk about some of these early enrollees who are already on campus. Any of these freshmen caught your eye so far?
Jerez Parks, you look at him as a player that I think a lot of players not players, but a lot of people in the media or just people surrounding the team were maybe a little bit curious of what he was going to look like after taking a year off, and he looks great physically. I don't have the measurables in front of me, but he's big. He looks lean.
I think Alabama's roster had him. The official roster had him like 260 pounds.
Yeah, but it's not wasted weight if that's
no.
the case.
I mean he's shredded. He looks good. He moves very well. I've been impressed with him as well.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody that can contribute to that jack linebacker position. I think Savion Smith is somebody that's especially now with Trayvon Diggs out, he's going to be a leader in the secondary, even though he hasn't played a game for Alabama
Very
yet.
talented. You could just tell that he's very experienced.
Yeah, there's some talk about, I know I've talked to Andrew Bone and some of the other recruiting guys, and I think they thought he was going to be a safety. It looks like he's going to start at cornerback, but I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe he does switch to another role. As he's a bigger guy, so he could play in that star position. He could play in that safety position. It really just depends on how things shake out, but right now he's getting a chance at cornerback. Who's another one?
Have you got a chance to see much of Slade Bolden? I personally haven't.
I mean, he's just been a reserve at safety, which was surprising in itself because he's listed as a wide receiver. He's kind of a guy that can do it all. I'm not sure how much of the field he's going to see in terms of I think he'll see a lot of special teams. I think he'll be able to work his way into a special teams role, but I'm not sure if he's going to be on the field for either defense or offense or wherever he gets I guess put in his first season. I think he could probably do either side of the ball well, but I think he's somebody that Alabama's going to try to develop a role for first before they kind of throw him into the mix.
Yeah, and Alabama, I mean, having a ton of guys that are coming in June. Josh Jobe, Cameron Latou, Emil Ikior, Jordan Davis, Tommy Brown, Xavier Williams, Jalen Armour Davis, Jerome Ford, Patrick Sartain Jr., Iyabi Anoma, and Christian Barmore. I mean, that's a long list of some very talented guys.
Yeah, especially in Anoma and Sartain Jr. I think that those two players could definitely contribute.
Anoma's a freak.
Yeah. The only thing about it is that Alabama has a lot of talented jack linebacker.
Absolutely.
You look at Terrell Lewis, and then when Anthony Jennings comes back, and then you've also got guys like Christopher Allen, and we mentioned Jerez Parks.
But as we saw last year, it's so vital to have quality depth.
Right.
Because guys were just flying out last game, and you continually had to have a guy step up. And that's what we saw last year. So maybe some of these younger guys can have that quality depth. I mean,
well, especially with in the secondary too, with a guy like Patrick Surtain Jr., who if he can step up and take one of those starting roles, or even just contribute early on in the season, that will really help Alabama in terms of depth. They need some guys that are ready to step up as freshmen, and he looks, if you look at his tape, he looks the most poised to do that of that bunch. But that's a really talented bunch. Any one of those guys could really, they all have the talent to step in and play as freshmen at Alabama. There's not a bad player in that bunch.
What have you thought of some of these new coaches that you get to see during practice, how they've been working with the players? Which new assistant coaches have jumped out to you?
Right off the bat, Josh Gaddish seems to be a real hands-on coach. Seems to just be someone that, if I was a player, I think I'd want to play for. He seems to really get it and has a lot of high energy. All the new coaches seem to have a little bit of high energy, and that might come through youth, and that also might come through just, they're in their first year. And when you're in the first year of anything you do, you're going to have that kind of that drive to prove yourself to, and everything's fresh, everything's new, everything's exciting. So I think that will kind of benefit Alabama. I think it might hurt them at times at first, as there's got to be some growing pains. That's also part of starting and having new people in an organization, in a system. But I think that the energy is going to outweigh that. I think it's going to be real positive for Alabama.
What have you seen from Carl Scott, the new defensive backs coach?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of the things with the energy, they look like he's one of the guys that looks like he's bringing a lot of energy to the field.
Well, the reason I asked with him is because, in my opinion, I think that he's one of the newer assistant coaches that has the most pressure, because he's coming in with a completely new group, and Derek Ansley was a big time coach. I mean, look at what he's doing right now. So I think, a lot of eyes will be on Carl Scott and how he works at secondary. Now, the good thing for Scott is he's working right next to Nick Saban, as Nick Saban works with the secondary as well. But I think when you look at which coach has kind of the pressure on him to start the season, I would say him. And then I would also say that Tosh Lupoi has a little bit of pressure too, because he's taking over the defense, and he's a younger coach. But if anyone's capable at his age to take over Alabama's defense, it's certainly him.
Well, you mentioned Scott and Saban. That might be a help, but it also adds a little bit more pressure too. Because
there you go.
The boss is always there, and that's kind of defensive backs are kind of Saban's baby too. So, that adds a bit of pressure. But I think he's capable. And then as Tosh Lupoi, several players have said nothing's changed about Tosh Lupoi. He still brings the same intensity. We can see that in the media viewing sessions we get to see. He looks just as intense, and he's going to be able to now kind of bring that to the whole defense. So I think that's an exciting prospect for Alabama as well.
The NFL draft is just around the corner. Alabama will have several guys headed to the NFL once again. Who do you think's first to go off the board? It's clearly Minkah, right?
Oh yeah, that's 100% Minkah. I'd be shocked if any of them went before him.
I'm looking at NFL.com right now. They have him at number 7 going to the Bucks.
Yeah, that could happen. I wouldn't be surprised if he, it seems like he's cooling off of that 4th spot. I think, at some point, some people saw him going 4th to the Browns. That seems to be cooling off, and he's kind of dropping. I'm not sure if him dropping has anything to do with, how NFL teams are evaluating him. I think it's more just how many teams are going to try to trade up and get a quarterback. All those players are, years like this where there's a lot of quarterbacks that could go early, I think it's beneficial for teams that are looking for those talented players, because you're going to see a guy like Minkah maybe drop to like a 7, an 8, a 9, where in a normal year or in a year that just doesn't have as many quarterbacks, you're not going to get a player of that caliber at that low in the draft. So I do think he might fall, but it's only because of that.
You think Sam Darnold's the clear choice at number 1?
I've seen some Sam Darnold, and I must have seen like the 2 worst games, because every time I forget which 2 games I saw, but I saw at least twice, and he was throwing pick after pick. I don't know. I don't know if they're. I think there's a lot of good options, but I don't know if there's there's not one quarterback in this draft that I'm totally sold on. To be honest, I'm not even just saying this because I want the Patriots to pick him, but I wouldn't mind if the Patriots drafted Lamar Jackson if they could get him somewhere in the mid-1st round. Just as my dad being from Boston and me rooting for the Patriots, I'd like him as the heir apparent to Tom Brady. That's the quarterback that I'm probably the most excited about. But then again, he's kind of a more high risk, high reward guy. I mean, he's not as much of a sure bet as some of the guys like Darnold, but I think he has a really high upside.
NFL.com also has Calvin Ridley at number 15 going to the Cardinals, and they also have Jerome Payne at number 19 going to the Cowboys. Let's see who else they got in here.
Ridley's an interesting guy because I've seen him kind of slip on some boards. He had a not as good of a combine as he probably wanted to. He didn't really light up the positional drills, and so he might slip. But I think he's a good talent. I think if he does slip, it's going to be really beneficial to that team that he falls to. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he's not the second Alabama player picked. He seems to be trending in that other direction. Maybe a Daron Payne might go above him. Another person I've seen kind of keep on climbing is Rashaan Evans. I think he's, he could have worked his way into the first half of the 1st round. He's a guy that seems to be really hot on a bunch of boards.
You're listening to the BamaInsider.com podcast. This is Kyle Henderson along with Tony Tsoukalas. We're coming to you from beautiful Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You can download or subscribe to any of our podcasts by simply going on to iTunes and looking for the BamaInsider.com podcast. Talking a little Alabama football today as we enter the early days of April. We have Alabama's first scrimmage. We have the NFL draft coming up. And we'll also hear from Saban again on Saturday to get his initial thoughts of the scrimmage. Tony, before we close out, would it be a complete shocker if I'm just kind of going back to the Collin Sexton deal? Would it be a complete shocker if he stays?
I don't think it'd be a complete shocker. I would be,
but
surprised.
but why? Why would he stay? I mean,
we've seen I forget who was the latest draft board. I mean, I've seen him slip down to 12. Next year's draft class is not as good, so he's a guy that could stay, improve his draft stock, maybe be a top 5 pick in next year's draft. He could take out an insurance policy, which would allow him to, if he did get hurt, he could take an insurance policy for the worth of whatever a signing bonus would be. So that kind of protects him there. And he's a guy that, he doesn't seem like he hates school, and he doesn't. He's a 4.0 student. So I don't think he hates the whole college atmosphere. So I think it's a tough decision for him. I think in the end, it's probably going to be hard for him to turn down that money, but the possibility of maybe improving his draft stock and becoming more of a household name. I mean, if he stays, he's one of the best players in college basketball. This team's a lot more experienced. You'd expect them to make a deeper run in the tournament next year with Collin Sexton if he stayed. So there are reasons for him to stay. I don't think he will, but I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if he doesn't, if he decides to come back, just because of those reasons I just said. There are some pros to staying, even if the money on the other end does seem pretty enticing.
We will have the press conference for Alabama basketball at 10 a.m. Central Time on Friday, April 6th on BamaInsider.com. And, we'll figure out what Collin Sexton's next move is. For the BamaInsider.com crew, this is Kyle Henderson along with Tony Tsoukalas. Catch us back on the website. Thanks for following us. Tell your friends to subscribe. Subscribe on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. But remember, we got all the juicy content back at BamaInsider.com. From Tuscaloosa, Alabama, this is the BamaInsider.com podcast.